Hello everyone and welcome to this review for Rise of the Shadows for the Mage class. We're going to be looking at all the Mage cards and rating them on a scale of 1 to 5. You can find out details about the scale in the description below on YouTube or by going back to the Neutrals video where we spoke a bit more about it. So let's kick this off with the Legendaries. We're going to start off with Khadgar. Khadgar is a 10 mana 4/12 dragon. That reads, your first spell each turn costs 0. Battle Cry, discover a spell. This card seems very powerful when you think about, I can play Khadgar's Flame Strike, I can do Khadgar's this, Khadgar's that, but you have to bear in mind that all of those things you're doing, you can only do on turn 10. Flame Strike is a lot worse when you're doing it on turn 8, turn 9, and turn 10, compared to doing it on turn 7. And that's the big issue I have with Khadgar. I think one of the best applications of Khadgar might just be Blizzard, because you can freeze the board, because Flame Strike is not going to kill everything on the board. So we're going to need to freeze the whole board with playing Khadgar. And then hopefully maybe Khadgar survives and we can get the tempo back the next turn. But we're waiting until turn 10 to make a tempo play. And that's the biggest problem I have with Khadgar. I can't see why Khadgar is actually going to be that good. Like, Khadgar is very flashy and very cool, and pretty interesting design. It gets people hyped, and that's really good. But ultimately, I don't think Khadgar is a very good card. Like, I can't see us really wanting to play this 10 mana 4/12 dragon. And the only 4/12 dragons we play, we generally try and cheat out. So, I mean, okay, Ysera is probably the one exception, but that doesn't really see much play these days anyway. So ultimately, I'm going to give Khadgar a 2. I would actually just give it a 1, but frankly, I'm only giving it a 2 because I think that it'll see play because people are trying to force it more than because it's actually good. It probably just deserves a 1, but if I'm going to be realistic about my prediction for what I expect to see, I expect to see it seeing Fringe play. Next up, we have Khadgar. Khadgar is a 2 mana 2/2 legendary minion. Your cards that summon minions summon twice as many. So this whole summon minions thing is a theme that they're trying to do with Mage now, and I really don't like this whole summon random minions thing. To me, it doesn't feel very magey, to be quite honest. But beyond that, it doesn't really fit with Mage's playstyle in any way. Like summoning random minions when you have like Bloodlust or Savage Roar or some board buffs or something like that. That makes sense. Like, you've got a payoff for it. In Mage, your payoff is just like high rolling good minions and winning the game. And that's not a playstyle that feels good to play against, or a playstyle that feels good to play as, quite frankly, in my opinion. So I'm a little bit disappointed. I think Khadgar is a very good card for facilitating summons. The fact that you can play like even minions that just summon other minions, like the Henge Clan Hag we looked at, is a very weak example of this. But I mean, a 4 mana 1/3/3 that summons 2 1/1s. You play with Khadgar, you're spending 6 mana, you're getting 5/5 and 4 5/5 split between a 3/3 and a 2/2 and 4 1/1s. Now that's not really that exciting. I mean, we spent 6 mana to kind of fill the board with 9/9 worth of stats. Once again, Mage doesn't really have a payoff, a reason to want to do that. I think the synergies with Khadgar are much more going to be around high rolling the random cost minions that we see from cards like expected results in the past. Like, if you have spell damage and Khadgar into expected results, that can be kind of good, I suppose. You know, Cosmic Anomaly 4 with the spell damage +2, and then you go Khadgar coin expected results on 6 or something, and we get 2 4-cost minions or 4 4-cost minions. Now we've flooded the board in a way that we can apply pressure to the face and finish them off with burn. That's what I feel like is the game plan for the summon random minions thing. Like, you can do this with Astromancer and get 2 big minions on 9. Like, if you're playing a slow Mage deck. I'm just not sure that works I'm not sure slow Mage decks work without Frostled's Jaina, quite frankly. So, and we'll talk a bit about Mage overall, but Khadgar, I'm going to give a 3. Actually, I'm going to give him a 4 because I think he's very good in the summon decks. I think he's one of the main reasons you want to play the summon decks. But it's very unreliable to have a card that you're building around being this legendary that you can only kind of play once and get its effect. So I think I don't know. I think the summon mana minions deck is bad, but I think I'm just hoping it's bad because I hate the mechanic. So I'm gonna give Khadgar a 4, even though I really don't want to. I want to give Khadgar a 2 or a 1, to be honest. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was just a 1, but I'm gonna give it a 4 because it pushes that deck. I'm not really sure that deck is necessarily gonna see that much play though. I hope not. And here we see one of the X cost minion summoning cards. We have Power of Creation, an 8 mana epic spell. Discover a 6 cost minion, summon 2 copies of it. So this is a bit better because we get to choose our 6 cost minion. At least we get 3 options. This is probably one of the better designs for summoning X cost minions. Now if you play this with Khadgar, you get 4 copies of the 6 cost minion. Maybe we get that that 6 mana 4/7 with taunt and +1 spell damage. That can be very good to get a whole board full of taunts. That's a crazy turn, but we're having to wait until turn 10 to do that, or we're somehow magically getting Khadgar to stick. I mean, as a 2 mana 2/2, the chances he sticks on board for Power of Creation on turn 8 or something is just not that likely. So I'm not really sure how much we're going to see that. I think Power of Creation is just going to have to give us 2 6 cost minions for 8 mana, and once again I'm just not sure Mage makes the best use of them if it does get those, and so I don't really think Power of Creation is going to be all that good. So I'm going to give it a 2 in that I think it might see Fringe play in that summon minions deck, summoning Mage I suppose. Next we have Mana Cyclone. Mana Cyclone is a 2 mana 2/2 epic elemental minion. It reads Battle Cry. For each spell you've cast this turn, add a random mage spell to your hand. So at first, I wasn't very excited about this. And then I remembered that Elemental Invocation is still a card. The 0 mana spell that reduces the cost of the next elemental you play by 2. So what that means is if you just go Elemental Invocation, Mana Cyclone, you get back a spell. So you kind of cycled your Elemental Invocation and you got a 2/2 for free. So that's actually pretty good alone. And then if we consider the implications of doing it in like a turn with Stargazer Luna, or just any other turn where we would play like if you would play a Frostbolt as a tempo play, and then you played Elemental Invocation Mana Cyclone, you get to cycle that. And I think that's actually just really powerful, quite frankly. I think Mana Cyclone might just be very, very good for tempo Mage decks, which is kind of the only real place I see Mage going. Because it doesn't really have the late game anymore, and now Frostlich Jane is gone. So I think Mana Cyclone is close to a 4, and then I think it actually pushes the Tempo Mage archetype pretty heavily. Next up, we have Kirin TriCaster. Kirin TriCaster is a 4 mana 3/3 rare minion with spell damage +3. Your spells cost 1 more. So this buffs up your spells at the same time, making them more expensive. So if we think about some spells that we wouldn't mind paying 1 more for if we got some spell damage, the kind of ones that come to mind are Arcane Explosion. Paying 3 mana for a 4 damage spell is not so bad. I mean, in the case where you play Kirin TriCaster and Arcane Explosion in the same turn, you basically just played Flame Strike. I mean, that's 7 mana, but you got a 3/3 and played Flame Strike. Now, that's not as good as playing Flame Strike and getting a free Arcane Tyrant, but the Kirin TriCaster sticks around, so that means the next turn you can also get some interesting synergies. There is obviously the fact that this kind of curves with unexpected results in a more tempo-based deck, where we play Kirin TriCaster on 4 into unexpected results on 5, as it will now cost 5, and then we get 2 5-cost minions, which is fairly powerful. So I think there are some pretty interesting synergies. I really like the design of this card in the way they've built in the upside and the downside. If we consider this with like 1 mana cost spells that we have, the twin spell we will see later, and like what are the other 1 mana cost mage spells? Arcane Explode, what's it? Arcane Missiles. That's what I'm thinking of. I mean, 1 mana to deal, or you're upping it to 2 mana to deal 5 damage, which basically turns it into a cheaper Cinderstorm, which we already know is kind of playable. So I think that Kirin TriCaster actually might be relatively playable. The biggest issue is that we're paying 4 mana for a 3/3, and that's the reason I'm going to just give it a 2, because we are underpaying so much for the stats that we have to find a really, really good payoff for the spell damage. And usually really, really good payoffs when you're underpaying for stats involve killing your opponent. And I'm not sure how easy it is to kill your opponent with Kirin TriCaster. Next up, we have Conjurers Calling. Conjurers Calling is a 3 mana a 3 mana rare spell. It has twin spell and destroy a minion. Summon 2 copies of the same cost to replace it. So at first, I thought you could destroy your opponent's minion and get minions. I thought that was insane. And then I realized to get the minions yourself, you have to destroy your own minion. You can use it to destroy your opponent's minion, but then they get 2 minions as a replacement. So that doesn't seem good, except in certain scenarios. I like that it has the flexibility that you can target your opponent's stuff. But the biggest issue I have with it is that it's basically just another one of these like summon minions card, summon the X cost minions card, and I just really don't like those. I mean, it synergizes as well with Khadgar, right? Like, you value trade with something. Let's say you value trade with a 4-drop. You play Khadgar, Conjurers Calling on that 4-drop. You get 4 new 4-drops. Now, somewhere in there, you should have at least gotten some good minions. I believe the way this will work is Conjurers Calling can summon 2 different minions, and then Khadgar will just always give you a copy. So you'll get 2 minions twice, if that makes sense. So you can get like a Yeti and Henge Clan Hag, let's say, if you're getting 4 mana. So you can get 2 Yetis and 2 Henge Clan Hags. You'll never get 3 or 4 different minions, I don't think, the way I understand this. So I think Conjurer's Calling is maybe the best summoning card. It's kind of like an evolve effect, except a more like duplicating evolve effect, if that makes sense. So instead of like spending 1 mana to evolve some minions, you transform them to the same cost, but you get another minion. And the higher up you go in cost, the better that is versus evolve. So I think with Khadgar, it might be powerful, and it might be powerful enough that you can play this without having to play Khadgar every time you play it. And I think that's the thing that makes the summoning mage deck reasonable. So I think this might be a 4 because it pushes that deck, but I'm just going to give it a 3 because actually with Twin Spell, I'm not even really counting the Twin Spell in a lot of what I'm mentioning here. Like, you can do this over and over again, right? So you do it the first time on like, let's say the 4-drop that you value traded with. So you get 2 more 4-drops. You can trade the one off and value trade with the other, and then you can Conjurer's Calling again, and you get another 2 4-drops. So it actually seems like a good way to maintain the board. So I'm actually going to give Conjurer's Calling a 4. I think it actually might even be more important to the summoning deck than Khadgar is to that deck. But I still don't think that deck's necessarily going to be that good. So, like, bear in mind that these are 4s, but like, they're not going to see play 4s in a way. Like, if I was being brutal, I'd give this and Khadgar 2s because the deck is probably just Fringe, right? And I suppose maybe that's what I should be doing, basing it on the deck being Fringe, but yeah. Conjurer's Calling, I'm going to give it a 4 because I can maybe see that deck being a thing. I just really don't want it to be. Next, we have Magic Trick. Magic Trick is a 1 mana rare spell. Discover a spell that costs 3 or less. So the spell doesn't get a reduction, which is how I first read this, and I thought it was crazy. You just get another cheap spell. So this works fairly well with something like Mana Cyclone. It works fairly well with Stargazer Luna. It works well in those kind of tempo decks, as well with the one of the cards that we're going to see coming up in the commons. So I think that this card might see play in those decks. It's not a reason to play those decks. It's just a cheap way to activate a lot of the effects. So I think that I'm going to give it a 3 for that reason, because it's a cheap way to activate effects, and it gives you another cheap way to activate the effects that you have kind of control over. And also the art is brilliant. The goblin giving the like that whole pretending you pulled off your forefinger with your thumb thing is just that's great because it's a cheap magic trick, right? And that's exactly, the art describes exactly what the card is, and I really like that. Next we have Messenger Raven. Messenger Raven is a 3-mana 3/2 beast, common, battle cry, discover a mage minion. I mean, Archmage Antonidas is like always the big payoff mage minion. I mean, there's like Janalai if you deal enough damage with your hero power somehow with no odd deck. Like, I just don't really see a world in which I want to play Messenger Raven rather than putting that mage minion in my deck. So I'm going to give Messenger Raven a 1. Next up, we have Magic Dart Frog. Magic Dart Frog is a 2-mana 1/3 beast. After you common, and after you cast a spell, deal 1 damage to a random enemy minion. So, I think Pandemonia, when we were talking about this after the reveal stream, compared it to Flamewaker, and I can see why you would kind of want to make that comparison. You get the cantrip every time. Well, not the cantrip. The effect every time you play a spell. The effect, though, just dealing 1 damage to a random enemy minion isn't really all that exciting. It's not bad, but you need to play, like, let's say 3 spells to kill like a minion on turn 3, right? And that's just not that easy to do. I'm not really sure this is a very big payoff for playing a bunch of cheap spells. And as a 2-mana 1/3, you've kind of lost tempo on that, so you need to make up the tempo in playing the spells. And I mean, we're gonna have to find some like specific token decks or something that this is gonna be good against. So I'm kind of gonna give Magic Dart Frog a 2. Obviously, there are scenarios where it can be very good with Sorcerer's Apprentice, but there's so many cards that, or any of the like cards that are triggered by spells are going to be good with Sorcerer's Apprentice, right? And we can't rate the card based on those scenarios. So overall, I think I'm going to just have to give Magic Dart Frog a 2. Yeah, 2 seems fair. Next we have Ray of Frost. This is one of the other twin spells for Mage. It's a 1-mana twin spell that reads freeze a minion. If it's already frozen, deal 2 damage to it. So you can spend 2 mana to deal 2 damage to a minion, which is pretty underwhelming. You can spend 1 mana to freeze a minion and then freeze it again the next turn for another 1 mana, which is a good way to lock out something in like hand lock, where they are going to be playing Mountain Giants early on as a singular minion. And if you're like a tempo mage, you can lock out the hand, like the Mountain Giant, whilst you go face and punish them for that. So that's like a very good tech use of Ray of Frost if we see decks like that, hand locks, where you're kind of playing like a single big giant or something early on. And then you can also use it to freeze 2 minions in the same turn for 2 mana, which is not too bad. I mean, we could just pay 1 mana to freeze all their minions, 1 mana more with Frost Nova to freeze all their minions. So I think that I really do like the versatility of Ray of Frost. Maybe it's a cheap spell that we play in our decks where we want a bunch of cheap spells. You know, synergize with Mana Cyclone, Stargazer Luna, and the Frog that we just saw. But overall, I don't even know if it's necessarily that good a deck for, that good a card for those decks. And I think maybe the freezing 2 minions, I don't know how often we're going to use this to actually damage the minion. I feel like most of the time we're going to freeze. I think maybe this could be a 3 at best, because it's multiple spell activations that can be kind of powerful in a tempo mage deck. And that's kind of where I see it. I also see it as a way to kind of freeze a minion and go face, in a classical way where you would like freeze a minion and go face with Mana Worm. Now the Mana Worm's 2 mana, it's less enticing, but Mana Worm's still probably more of a payoff than the Frog for this kind of a deck. So maybe this is just a 3. Yeah, reasonable enough in that deck, but not really the reason we're playing it. So, okay, I'm going to give this a 3, but in the Tempo Mage deck, which I think probably has more hopefully more likelihood than the summoning mage deck to be a thing, although there could be a little bit of a crossover between the two. They kind of, you might kind of do the summoning stuff in that deck with some of the cheaper stuff like the Conjurers Calling. So that's all the mage cards. Overall, I think Mage is in a pretty bad position right now. It's going to get worse with Frostlich Jaina leaving and all the big spell mage stuff. It gets much worse with Odd Mage leaving as well for like the more tempo aggressive deck. You also lose the weapon. So overall, I think Mage is in a pretty bad position. I think Mage is going to stay in a bad position. I would have it kind of towards the bottom of my rankings for where I imagine most of the classes to be after Rise of the Shadows. I think the one hope is a tempo mage deck that can use some of these cheap spells and Mana Cyclone. I think Mana Cyclone is the hope for Mage. But overall, I don't really think it looks like a very good position for Mage in Rise of the Shadows. If you disagree with me, you're welcome to share your thoughts in chat, or if you agree with me like Fodas does, then you can also share your thoughts there. And otherwise, you can also comment on YouTube. And you can also reach out to me on Twitter. Like and subscribe, do all of that, and keep watching the rest of the videos. Next up, we have Paladin.